and welcome to this exciting panel we have lined up for you this afternoon, or probably evening, depending on where you're logging in from. So we have a very distinguished panel that has a lot of experience in payments and innovation space. So before I get into the panel, let me just get started and introduce our panelists for today. We have Chen Zhentao. Chen is a director in the FSI space within the South African region for Huawei. He has over 20 years of experience specializing in IT strategy, enterprise architecture, data center technology, and a lot of other innovative products across banking and insurance with companies in China. So welcome, Chen. We have Otto Williams. Otto heads strategic partnerships, fintechs, and ventures for Visa Central and Eastern Europe, Middle East, and African region. His focus is in identifying, structuring, and commercializing compelling payment experiences and opportunities with fintechs and strategic partners. So we look forward to having Otto and his views in this space available as well. We also have Dr. Dennis Nga. He's an external advisor to Bain & Company and an adjunct faculty at the Singapore Management University. Dennis completed his doctorate in payments research with the Singapore Management University and holds an MSc in marketing and consumer insights from Nanyang Technology University. In addition to this, Dennis has also ascended the executive leadership program at INSIT, and his research has primarily been focused in cashless payments and has various publications on this topic as well. And lastly, I'd like to welcome Nita Omanga. Ms. Nita joined CBK in February 2020, where she serves as an Assistant Director, Banking and Payment Services, and Head of the Digital Payments Division. So she has the responsibility overall for national and regional payment systems and participants and payment service providers. Nita spearheads innovative payment products and approvals in line with the bank's national payment strategy and policy, and also responsible for the enterprise data warehouse compliance. So welcome aboard, Nita, as well to this panel. And thank you again to all the panelists for joining us this afternoon for what I hope is going to be a very exciting and fun-filled discussion. So before we get into the discussion, and I'm sure you've heard the panel that just went on before us, payments is a vital business, and it's definitely at the crossroad of a lot of disruptive forces. We heard the speaker from Cellulant talk about the constant change that we're going to go through, and I think payments is one of those economic revolutions that has consistently gone across this, right? There's financial institutions that continuously depend on payments for the long-term success. Payments is undergoing unprecedented change. If you look at the economic model of payments, it's always increasing, under increasing pressure just from how they accelerate and start and evolve. And competition is obviously also accelerating across the value fragments, right? And if you look at all these forces, there's a lot of activity happening, obviously, at the foundational level with regards to cashless payment systems. At the global level, there's a lot of different things we see compared to what we encounter in Kenya from a digital payments perspective, right? And these are just some of the things I want to focus on in our discussion today with the panelists. So if we were to get started, if you look at how payment ecosystems have evolved vis-a-vis the uptake of cashless payments within Kenya, there could be potential issues around fragmented systems, right? If you look at the flexibility to address customer demands, you have to think about the structural incentives that would be required to build confidence amongst smaller merchants, right? And then there's several ways to achieve this. For example, integrating APIs in merchant systems, or in terms of just boosting customer confidence. So maybe I can ask Mr. Chen or Otto to comment on how do you see this playing out in our market, and what do you think digital payment providers within the payment ecosystems need to consider in this outlook?
Yes, thank you. Actually, I think it's really amazing that when you look at what's happening for the whole market of the Kenya, it's really amazing. So like cashless, like digital payment, like online mobile services, everywhere. And I think not only in Kenya, even the whole region. So, but when you look at what's happening, for all the transaction behavior, when you compare with traditional like a bank card transactions, totally different. And I would like to share with you two of the different behavior. And the first one is that the user amount is really, the increasement of the user amount is really aggressive, really dramatically. So based on Huawei's experience, is that when we help our customer to build their digital payment, actually, the total user increasement will be several million, 2 million or 3 million for even 1 year. So this is one key thing. And the second key thing I would like to share here is that the transaction volume or transaction volume and number is totally different. And because for the digital payment or cashless transaction, so it's highly likely that for each kind of a transaction it's much lower. I mean, the transaction amount, the money number, when you compare with a traditional banking card or something. So this is give a big pressure for the current ecosystem, like a digital payment or something like that. So this really give a big pressure to the current digital payment system. And from the perspective of the system, perspective based on Huawei's experience, so we think there are several key things for the system platform is really important. The first thing is that open and cloud-based, because really hard for you to give the prediction of what is TPS, the peak TPS or TPM for 1 day. So this is give the pressure that the system should have the capability to extend the current resources, based on policy. This is open-based and cloud-based, system platform. And the second thing is that distributed, like that. When the resources is not enough, that the system can be distributed the new service or new resource to the current existing system, and based on that, the system can have the capability, have linear, that is more transaction volume, that is more resource can support such kind of higher kind of transaction volume, and based on that, I think. As you mentioned just now, like the open-based architecture, it's very flexible for the system to connect with not only internal of the system, but as well as some system from the ecosystem, from third party. The open-based API or system is also very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Chen. Otto, do you want to add on any comments to that? Your views around that?
Yeah, certainly. First of all, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to be part of this session and actually share some views here with the conference. Enabling SMEs is an imperative for digital, especially in this era coming off of the COVID pandemic. And what we've seen is there a couple of approaches that we need to take for this enablement. And first is payment inflows. We've got to be able to enable digitized payment inflows, and that is QR payments, pay by link, contactless payments, whether it's tap to phone or self-pause payments, so that merchants can actually see digitized payments coming from consumers. Now, the second aspect that's really important for enabling SMEs in this digital era is the outflows. How are SMEs able to make digitized payments to suppliers, and how are they able to make payments to their employees via payroll? Now, once you've been able to solve these two aspects of payments, what you're now able to do is build on top of that, based on the data that you're able to see, to solve working capital challenges, to enable offers and loyalty, to bring buy now, pay later solutions to merchants and to consumers. And this is extremely important. And that is where we as Visa have been engaging in efforts with our various stakeholders across the market to enable these experiences for both merchants and for consumers. And so, on the buy now, pay later side, on the pay by link side, we are bringing our CyberSource assets to enable payments by link. We're bringing our contactless technologies and solutions to enable tap-to-phone and soft POS payments. We're opening up e-commerce payments for these merchants to be able to pay internationally, to pay their suppliers, and to also be able to make their own purchase of goods. And that allows for the merchants' needs to be served via working capital lending, scoring, offers and loyalties to consumers to drive this ecosystem and enable a new digitized experience, especially coming off of the challenge that we've seen with the COVID pandemic.
Okay. Thank you, Otto. And if we stay on that topic, I mean, both you and Chen made some very important references. So you talk about demand, you talk about needs, you talk about the consumer, right? And if we just stay on this topic, if I had to expound on it a little bit further, I mean, there's definitely a shift in demand if you think about it, and if you look at the demographic shift, and I think obviously cashless payments have been accelerated given the pandemic we are navigating. But even if we had looked beyond the pandemic, there's the Generation Z coming into effect, right? So the 7 to 20-year-olds, the generation of the digital world, that is expected to surpass the total millennial population by 2021, right? And this is important in looking at cashless payment systems, because if you look at the shift in the population, we're going to have a significant impact on how the consumer views cashless payment systems, right? So you're looking at a very tech-savvy, tech-exposed generation, and they're going to have a much higher dependency on cutting-edge, automated, quicker, and efficient technologies and services. So as a result, the demand for digital payments and systems will see a rapid growth in coming years. So maybe if I can ask Dennis to comment on this, how do you see payment systems adapting to this opportunity, or what considerations should be applied now to payment systems, perhaps around customer experience? Because it's something everybody talks about, right, in our day-to-day. But what does that really mean with regards to cashless payment systems?
Thanks, Urvi. Thanks for the moderating and the questions. The interesting thing is I've actually, as part of my research, I've actually interviewed some very young children, aged around 13 years old. And of course, I've had to get some special approval because these are very special research subjects. And I tell you, the interesting thing about this new generation are they definitely, as you mentioned, are really into all this cashless payments and everything. But their parents are afraid. Their parents are totally paranoid. Can you imagine them? The parents are thinking, oh no, I've got a debit card thanks to Otto. I've got a credit card. I've got a mobile phone thanks to Chen from Huawei, right? And my children can buy anything and everything. So it's great for cashless payments, I must say, for the industry. But for parents, they are totally worried. And of course, this is also a regulatory headache for Nita, right? Coming from CDK. So that's another issue which they're trying to resolve. But I think herein lies the opportunity for the industry. And of course, there's got to be some regulatory oversight and stuff to make this safe for everybody. But then think about it as somebody from the commercial world coming out with a mobile payment mechanism or product which gives special controls to parents who's able to view and approve before their kids and their children can buy. So these are my thoughts in terms of the parents, but there are also a lot of other stuff which I found out in the sense that because of this younger generation, they started using cashless payments, like they were born with it. They have got cashless payments in terms of retail stored value cards. And think about like the Starbucks card, right? So they don't have to wait till they're 21 to have the regulatory income or the age to hold a so-called credit card. They've got debit cards, and if they cannot get debit cards, they can go to various stored value companies which will give them these kinds of stored value cards. And it's not just the retail stored value cards. There's also increasingly mass transit, the trains, the buses, which because of the speed of transactions, they want people to pay instead of cash, but electronic means, right? So those also are opportunities for all of us in the industry to take the additional initiative to get these people into the cashless domain. So those are my thoughts, and I think it's very interesting times for us. And I think we've got a lot to learn from Sweden, who's gone almost cashless. We've got a lot to learn from China, and I think Zhentao from Huawei can even give more experiences in that regard, because they've gone ahead a long way. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
So I definitely resonate with you, having interviewed a 13-year-old. You have no idea the number of devices we have had to set up just for my 7-year-old schooling from home, and everything she needs around that whole homeschooling ecosystem. So definitely resonate on the concerned parent side. But Chen, do you want to make a comment on that based on what Dennis has made reference to?
Yes, actually, I think this is a very interesting topic, and I think not only 7 years old kids or something. If you look at 20, 30, or even 40, I think they already involved the whole progress of the cashless. So, but I want to say here is just also very interesting from a different layer of the system or ecosystem, and I think it could be divide into different layers. Of course, the very bottom or fundamental layer is technical layer, and the middle layer, you could name it as a digital payment platform, and on top of that, actually, you can call it like an ecosystem. And I think from the perspective of the consumer or from the end user, they really care about the very upper layer, this ecosystem. And based on our practice, I think if you look at some like ecosystem is also can be divided into two parts of different very key things. The first key thing is that, yeah, it's right that the way you build a digital payment system, actually you need leverage, as more as you can for the third-party services from other industry, like banking, telecom operators, insurance, retail, travel, hotel, something. This is the one thing. And the second thing is much more interesting, because I just want to give you an example that traditionally, when we go out for traveling, when we arrive the hotel, actually it's very basically that we use our credit card for the guarantee fee or something, for 1 week, several days or something. But actually, because this is quite new for the digital payment platform, maybe that is based on such kind of platform. And a system actually not only know our information, our basic information, but as well as the system can know our credit. So, and based on such kind of credit system, actually the system could refresh, the new progress, when the system cooperation with like hotel, for example. So based on such kind of platform, when the first time you arrive the hotel reception, actually there's no need for you to give them to show them your credit card to do some guarantee pay or something. Actually, no need, because your credit is really really good. So based on such kind of ecosystem, and I think the cashless society or the digital payment can refresh not only the internal process as well as some process, like a barrier for different industry. That is my opinion and thoughts. Thank you.
So definitely very, very interesting thoughts coming out from two different dimensions, right? The research-oriented one and the practical, real application of it. But if we just build onto that, and then we talk about all the layers, and then you talk about the ecosystem, right? That's coming into play. I mean, one of the things that comes into my mind is the element of security, right? Security, I think, tends to be one of the most crucial elements whenever it comes to payments. And then you talk about it when you talk about the ecosystem you talk about it when you talk about the technology infrastructure, and it just resonates. And if we look at what cyber fraud has cost the Kenyan economy, it's cost us about 29.5 billion shillings based on a research study that was undertaken just last year. And you look at the expanding financial services ecosystem, and you look at the different failure points that come into a cashless payment system, right? You find authorities also face a lot of challenges in mitigating the risks. I mean, you talk about money laundering, you talk about financing of terrorism, you talk about cyber attacks, and now we have personal data issues to deal with as well in our part of the world, right? And all of these pose different risks, I guess, to the financial system. So maybe, Nita, if I can ask you from a regulatory perspective, what challenges do you see as a regulator in just trying to manage this and also then balancing, I guess, the need for availability, increasing consumer demand and needs? How do you see that balance coming about?
Okay, thanks, Urvi, and hello to everybody. I think, Urvi, from the perspective of security, we can look at that from different angles. We can look at the security of the consumer, the security of the infrastructure, the security even of the service providers. Yeah, because there are different types of attacks coming across all the different channels. Now, we've seen a great increase, of course, in digital payments over this pandemic period, and we are hopeful that we will be able to sustain the new volumes. Coming with this increase in digital payments, we've got new entrants, new players into the ecosystem, as you might say. With them come third-party providers that they come with, who will probably introduce a new set of risks that haven't been seen before. And another reason why they might introduce new risks is the third parties are probably not from the finance industry. They're just providing a platform. And they probably don't always have the discipline that people in finance, banks, and others have, and therefore they bring with them their own risks, and there's a whole education curve that comes with that. Now, at CBK, our mandate is security of the financial market, systems, consumers, in the interest of public good. When we look at the public, I'm sure many of you who are here in Kenya know where CBK is located, down at Haile Selassie, opposite the train station. This is where all the matatus pass. It's very loud in the evenings. There are tens of thousands of people walking across, going into Kikomba. Now, when we look out of the window, that is the consumer. To us, that is the average Kenyan consumer. How is he or she going to be protected? When we talk of digital payments, it is predominantly, in this country, it is mobile payments. Yeah, of course, we have other form factors, but we are predominantly looking at a very high traction of mobile payments. So we look at things like the phones. Phones some of them come with built-in apps. Some of those apps charge the consumer, without their knowledge, without their consent. What do these apps actually contain? Was the consumer made aware when he bought the phone? We look at closed-loop solutions where customers can only access services provided by the device manufacturer. That, again, has an element of security in it. There's the new sense of, people getting inundated with marketing SMSs from all over the place. You see, all of these speak to the security of the consumer. There's exposure of the consumer to unsuitable content. We've just talked about children accessing these devices. Yeah, you give your child a phone, and I really liked what Chen said about parental controls, because this has to go even further back to when the account is being opened, when I'm taking a phone for my daughter, because she's not 18, so the phone is in my name, everything is in my name. So being able to put parental controls actually at the time of opening the account. So we look at things like exposure of unsuitable content to consumers. We look at the security of the phone itself, Urvi. Many people might we probably take it for granted, things like locking the phone, don't download apps from third-party sites, don't use public Wi-Fi, don't use public charging stations, and have an antivirus. But the public in general may not be aware of these things, and whoever is providing them with the service needs to educate the consumer at the very inception. When we look at things like fraud, because there is an increase in fraud, well, it's ever increasing, if I can put it that way. Over the years, this part of the world seems to be sometimes quite hard hit. And reasons for that is because of, we are very agile, everybody has a device, people may not take it for granted that they will not be victims. So we've got account takeovers, like SIM swaps, which is still very rampant, unauthorized digital loans being taken by, unscrupulous people, probably using my account, taking a loan in my name, and then I'm made to pay for that. We also look at how the customer is secured through resolution of disputes. So lack of clear and documented dispute mechanisms from the service providers is also a threat to the consumer. Of course, we've got the data privacy concerns and data privacy education. What exactly, we keep talking about data. What does that mean to the common man, and how is he to protect his own data? How to educate them from phishing scams. We, as guys here, all know about phishing, but probably the others don't, and it's evident that they don't, because this is how actually they get defrauded. When we look at it from a systems point of view, the solution or the app or the digital payments platform must be robust. Yes, the platform itself must not introduce instability into the national payments infrastructure, because this would then lead to loss of consumer confidence. It would erode all of the gains that we have made thus far. So we are very, very particular that we authorize entities whom we believe have invested in security. They have very intelligent monitoring systems. They have the right controls, KYC, money laundering, all of those things are very much in place. That we ask for their policies, we go through them, and we reach a point where we are comfortable that this entity has done as much as they can in terms of security. We also ensure that the consumer funds that are held, commonly they're held in wallets by wallet providers, that the consumer's funds are secure. They are not used to run the business itself. We look at the owners, the directors, we vet them, make sure that they are each individually, personally vetted and meet the requirements to hold the various positions that they hold. We also encourage some collaboration across the industry, across banks, mobile money operators, fintechs, and other regulatory authorities. And all of this whole embodiment of security is actually made possible through supportive policy and legal frameworks, which we are continuously looking at, because the world is continuously changing. We can't always rely on what was. We have to move with the industry and with the payments. Thank you.
Thank you, Nita, for those interesting insights from a regulatory perspective. And perhaps I want to ask Dennis to make a comment now. So Dennis, Nita made a very important comment in what is the mandate of the central bank, right? And what is the boundaries within which that mandate extends. And when you look at digital payment systems, when you look at cashless payment systems, there tend to be a lot of players in the ecosystems, some of those outside these boundaries. And when you talk about cyber is one of those risks that has no boundaries. It has no global boundaries or territories, right? So based on your experience, how have you seen that play out in ensuring that there's a healthy balance between innovation, supporting cashless payment systems, and bringing all these integrators together?
Yeah, I think it's challenging times for all of us, and not least the regulators. Yeah, and in terms of and here we are talking in the world of AI, ML, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and even neural networks to detect fraud. But as Nita mentioned, you're still going to have to educate the common man, who may not necessarily have the understanding of securing his devices, at the lowest common denominator. So I think the job of the central bank and central bankers is not easy. All I can say is, having spent almost 28 years in the industry, both as a researcher and academic, and also as a practitioner, 11 years in Visa, and I can tell you that, between trying to control fraud from hard cash and having to control fraud from a cashless perspective, anytime I would prefer controlling fraud when it's cashless and electronic and digital. At least you have the digital footprints. At least, you can actually see where people have been in detection. I mean, hopefully it's early, and prediction would be much better. Because I've seen a few instances of global banks implementing AI and ML in terms of predictive analytics, in terms of knowing even which minute the fraud is going to hit. And that's only because they've been able to train the data, train the model in terms of improving the predictive powers of the model, and also going out and scraping the social media and also all the tweets and stuff like that in terms of what's probably potentially the next fraud area. Yeah. So I think it doesn't make the regulator's job any easier. But again, I'd rather be controlling digital rather than non-digital payments. Yeah, that's my perspective.
Yeah, that's very true. And you do make a very valid point. So maybe if I ask Otto, Dennis introduced this topic of AI and then machine learning, right? Definitely pointing to the discussion around emerging technology. And I don't think we can have a discussion around systems not having considered the impact of emerging technologies. What opportunities or challenges are you seeing from where you sit and all the partners you work with in their ability to leverage this, not only from a security perspective, but even looking at customer experience or operational efficiency?
Absolutely. So what we're seeing is consumers want convenient solutions, right? And you talked about Gen Z earlier. What are they looking for and what kinds of solutions? They want payments that happen in the background, whether it's walking into an Uber, getting to their location and walk of the car without having to worry about payments. They want to walk into a store and pick up stuff from the shelves and walk out and payments happen. They shop online conveniently and stuff shows up at the door. Merchants also want reliable solutions. They want consumer walks into their store, they can offer loyalty, they can bring offers, they can bring buy now, pay later solutions, they can pay their suppliers conveniently. But regulators want secure systems. And so at the end of the day, and regulators do also want to drive digital and drive cashless. In fact, we did a survey. We actually commissioned an independent study to look at the benefits of cashless across 100 cities. And what we found from that survey as Visa was that going cashless across these 100 cities drove almost $500 billion in benefits for these governments, in tax payments, in increased merchant sales, in consumer behaviors. And so we're going to be seeing a lot more IoT systems, it's remote bill payments, it's a lot of that stuff. Systems have to be enabled. And we realized this, and in partnership with regulators, what we've done is we've gone in and said, if you're a fintech player, yes, you're coming in and you're using first principles, Amazon Web Services, and Huawei systems. They're all available for you to be able to go live quickly. But you want to make sure that you can go live across multiple markets in a safe, convenient, and risk-managed way that the regulator can actually approve of and be comfortable in that market. And so what we've done is brought our global network and our global platforms to enable those capabilities. You also don't want to have to spend a lot of money to build new stacks that already exist. Those bills exist. And so how do we open it up? We launched what we're calling the FinTech Fast Track program, bring the fintechs on, give them capabilities, give them global scale across the 200 countries that we're in, use our AI and ML capabilities to score we see 65,000 transactions per second across multiple countries. How can we score that and make sure that fraud and risk is managed? And so this goes to the whole core and foundation of systems and infrastructure that is scalable, that is secure, and that is trusted, and that the regulator feels comfortable with, because they have to be able to manage, anti-money laundering, fraud and risk. You mentioned earlier the impact that it has had, just there in Kenya. And that's what we're bringing to enable digital experiences to drive these fintechs at scale, so they can create the solutions that next generation Z that you mentioned earlier wants to see and demand. And that merchants actually require to be successful, because that's what is the growth engine of any economy. And for a lot of our markets, that's what we're seeing the opportunity being going forward.
Definitely, and I think you've kind of just segued right into my next thoughts, right? So when we're talking about economic recovery, I guess it would be remiss of us not to talk about what does this mean moving into the era beyond COVID-19, right? And I think you made a little bit of reference to it in terms of new opportunities for fintech companies. So as the pandemic continues, and as even with the vaccine coming out, there may still be some time, especially where we sit in this part of the world, that we have to kind of navigate a little bit more uncertainty. You find there's a lot of pressure in the system, right? So as the broader economy shifts, from respond to recover, some fintechs may be presented with new opportunities, and I think you've spoken to some of them, right? And in terms of how they can use the unique assets and skills and kind of harness or drive what this future could look like. So if I can ask Chen, what do you see is an opportune or a big, bold or big act that fintechs possibly should be considering? And how do you think this is going to impact payment systems?
Okay, thank you. And I think this is also a very hot topic when we talk about the new normal of the epidemic. But it's quite clear, I think, for the new normal stage of the epidemic, so no contact, right? Online, mobile is a very key trend. And very interesting that when we talk about like a fintech, and I still it suddenly remind me, in my mind that several years ago, some of the banks in China actually they just have a new promotion of their strategy. So such amount of banks in China, they want to be a fintech company with banking license. So it's a little bit like a weird or strange. Always normal that it's really hard to say who is a specific banking industry, who is a specific fintech company. Actually, from nowadays they are merged. They mixed it together. The key reason is that who will be, leverage the new cutting-edge technology, fintech technology, so to enable the new business model, the new banking services to the long-tail users, by very convenient user improvement dramatically, such kind of style. And this is one thing. And the second thing, when we look at what's happening for the Kenya market, I don't think like big banks like PCB, they are only the banking industry. No, actually they are on their way for the fintech company, as well as some big telecom operators like Safaricom. The same. I don't think they're just like a traditional telecom operators. No, they are on the way of the fintech company. And also this is a good thing for the whole environment, because the competition there is very heavy. So that should be a good benefit for the long tail users, for the end users, the customers. That is my thinking.
So thank you, Chen, and I think you've kind of brought us to a very good point to kind of put a pause on the discussion in terms of when we talk about payment systems. I think increasingly more there's becoming a blurry line between who is the fintech, who's the telco, and who's the bank, and then who is the all-in-one, right? And then I see Nita nodding her head. So, and I'm sure that's a headache or a debate they continuously probably have behind closed doors, right? So maybe in closing, if I could just ask each one of you, if you had just a parting shot or your takeaways or your view on where you see cashless payment systems going, if you could just share that with us for the audience in a minute, maybe. Maybe we start with Nita, because I was just making reference to her headache.
Thank you. So I think parting shot to really encourage the fintechs. There is a lot of space, a lot of opportunity. However, innovation should not be done just for innovation's sake. They ought to identify either problems that they're coming to solve or gaps that they're coming to fill, and come up with solutions that have scale, that are not closed loop, not for a small target group, and bring those forward. The second thing is to encourage partnerships, because not everybody can be what we term to be a payment service provider, which is an authorized or licensed partner, but they can collaborate with other entities, and they certainly can. There is a lot of opportunity to develop risk solutions, similar to what Otto was talking about, getting us to share some infrastructure and identifying the places. What I would discourage is cut and paste solutions that, okay, I want to develop a wallet where I can send money to Urvi and she can send it back. But we are certainly very delighted with the development, and we do encourage it. Thank you.
Thank you, Nita. Dennis?
Yeah, just two words and maybe two thoughts for moving forward. I think firstly, this word called embeddedness. Being embedded, I think that's going to take on a greater significance as we welcome more fintechs, because I think payments, and especially now with COVID and with mobile being so pervasive, I think payments is going to allow for a certain amount of embeddedness for the new fintechs to make payments real in everyday life of people. So that brings me to the other point, which is basically B2B or B2C, because I think Otto mentioned a little bit on the initiative Visa has been doing in terms of payroll, supplies, and all that. Because I think there needs to be some thought in terms of which one would be the low-hanging fruit in terms of cashless payments, which I think, some thought in terms of embeddedness and B2B versus B2C. So that's my thought in terms of thought leadership for moving forward on cashless payments, especially with the new fintechs coming in.
Embeddedness, I like that. Thank you. So Otto, what are your parting shots for us?
Absolutely, thank you very much. So, look, the way that I would summarize this would be, one is you have to, and I think Nita mentioned this very frequently, create compelling solutions for merchants. It's not copy and paste. Successful fintechs unbundle. They take what banking has done or other industries, they unbundle it, and then they focus on a specific thing, whether it's P2P or it's cross-border payments or it's FX management or it's personal financial management. And they do a great job to create a compelling experience for consumers or for merchants. You have to do that. Keep costs down through partnerships. The payments world, very, cost-intensive industry. You've got to keep costs down through partnerships. Don't think you want to go out there and build a brand new stack from ground up that's going to scale across 100 countries. No. Partner to scale and keep costs down that way. And most important is you have to manage fraud, risk, and fines. It doesn't matter how successful you are. Fraud can take you out overnight. And so you've got to be able to manage that. And fines too. And you may have seen headlines where, different banks have been hit with AML fines and sanctions fines. Those are very hefty. And so you have to manage that. And you just have to use the right partnerships, use the right platforms, work with the right global players that have the systems that regulators trust and believe in and that work with. And, we've done this with fintechs. You have to be able to bring those three things together to be successful. But I think the point that I'll make here is standards is key. And where we're seeing fintechs being successful in countries is where the regulator has standards that work, because that means that fintechs that have developed solutions will bring it into their markets as well, instead of them having to build for a specific market. And Nita said it, you have to go from closed loop to open loop. Otherwise, it's a non-starter. Standard regulators have to enable standards and require standards in their markets, whether it's QR standards, payment system standards, e-commerce, and all of that stuff. And then also going digital, eKYC. We've seen markets where the regulator still requires paper signatures for you to be able to onboard accounts. That does not drive digitization, and it does not drive the smooth experience that we're moving into. Regulators have to enable things like eKYC. And this is more, the broader ecosystem enablement. Even though we have advice for our fintechs to create solutions, to keep costs down through partnerships, to manage fraud, we also have to build an enabling ecosystem for these fintechs and consumer merchant solutions to thrive. And that's standard. It's through digitized regulatory framework in order to be able to drive that forward.
So Otto has definitely set the way for us to have further engagement with Nita. So we'll pick that up. But I think we're at our time mark. So panelists, thank you so very much for making the time to join us at this online city event and sharing your thoughts and your views around cashless payment systems. I know it's a topic we can all debate and discuss late into the afternoon. But at this point, I'd like to then hand over back to the studio to continue with the rest of the agenda. So thank you again, everyone.